Hello everyone. Now in this lecture I want to configure the DC2 Fortigate firewall. Now in the previous lectures we have completed configuring the DC1 firewall and also the inside PC. We did a connectivity test from the PC to the firewall and from the firewall to the internet. Now we have not done from the PC to the internet. That would require the security policy and all, but before that I want to make sure that the routing is in place, because once the foundation routing is in place, then we can test all of the features. We have to be sure that the routing is working perfectly fine, the data plane is working perfectly, and then we can go and implement other features on top of that. Now in this video I would like to go on and configure the DC2 Fortinet. I will go and start the Fortinet there. I will also start the Linux here. I have a Linux box here, tiny Linux here, and let's wait for this to boot up. Before that, what I can do is I can just right click and wipe the Fortinet. If there is anything there, it will be cleared. It's like resetting the firewall. And let's click on that. I will show the CLI command also, how to reset the firewall through the CLI, right? Now I will double click on the FortiGate firewall on DC2, and I will wait for the system to initialize. Okay, so the Fortigate firewall has booted. The default username is admin, password is none. Hit enter. It should ask me to enter the new password, set the new password, and I'm in. And now if I want to check the I would say get system interface or info, like that, but it's not. And then I would have, yeah, I have the interface, and let's say port physical, like that. And then I have on the interface it is 104. Now this is basically a 7.0 version. If you do a get system, I think get system status is the command to check. Yeah, so I can see the version that it is 7.0.3. And by default, if you go and say let's ping to this IP 192.168.1.104 was the IP, and the ping is successful, right? Now you would think that let's go and access the GUI here, and this will not be possible because on the 7.0 version of the FortiGate firewalls, the HTTP is not basically added to the administrative access, so you would have to go and manually add it there. So I'm here, and let's say config system interface, say show here, and you should see on port 1 you don't see HTTP in the set allow access, right? So let's do two things. Let's configure a static IP on the interface and also add the HTTP there. So I'll say edit port 1, and if you want to see, you are inside the port 1 now. If you want to see the configs there, you just type in show and you will see the configuration of the port 1. Now if you want to change it, like say set mode to static, right, static, and then say set allow access, first of all copy all of this, right, and then add this, and then you have to set the IP to 192.168.1.52/24. Hit next, end. And now if you want to see, again, show system interface port 1, right, like that, and I see that the IP has been configured there. So I will not go to 104 now, I'll go to 52. Now that I have the HTTP enabled, so we will be able to access. Now I log in with admin add 123, and now the difference is that it is not asking for to activate the eval license because it is by default. So you can just start the Fortigate setup with begin, and if you want to change this, let's say DC2 FW, like that, and say okay, and say optimal, and say okay. I don't want to see this, and set on okay. Now I'm on the status page of the dashboard, and you can see the version here. It is also in the NAT mode by default. Now you can have 2 GB of RAM and 1 GB CPU like you have in the 7.2 version. Now, but if you go to the network part, go to the interface, and then you don't have the limitation of 3 interfaces, you have 4 interfaces here, right? And also if you go to dashboard and check the status here and go to the network here and expand, right now only one interface has been configured, which is port 1, and that is why you can see only one route there. Now let's go ahead and initialize the other interfaces. So I'll go to network, go to interface, and let's go to the topology. I need port 4, I need port 2. Now on port 4 IP, I will configure this as, double click here, and this is basically, you can say WAN, and let's say this is 99.1.1.52/24. Let's have the ping enabled and hit on OK, right? And on, so we did port 4, now we have to configure port 2. So I'll go to port 2, double click on that. Let's say this is my inside, and the IP is 10.3.3.52/24. Let's go enable ping and hit on OK. Okay, great. So I have the DC1, this is my DC2. Okay, so if I go here and say show system interface, and I'll see that port 1 has IP, port 2 has IP, and also port 4 should have IP. Now if I go and execute a ping here, execute ping to my default gateway on the outside, this one which is my router, and that is successful. Now if I do execute ping to 8888, will this be successful? I say no, because we haven't configured the static route as of now. Okay, and also not the DNS. So let's go and configure the static route and the DNS on the DC2 Fortigate firewall. Now to configure the DNS, you have seen in the CLI how you do it. Let's go and do in the GUI. So it is simple. You go to network and then DNS, and then these two are basically the one that is from Fortigate itself. You want to specify, you can click on specify, say 8.8.8, and they do a test, reachability test, and see if that is reachable or not. So I'll select 8.8.8.8 and 4.2.2.2 and apply. Now the second thing I need to do is the static default route. Now I'll go to network section and then go to static routes and then create one here, and this is perfectly fine. I want this to be a default route, but this should be pointing towards 99.1.1.1. Once I do this, this firewall should be smart enough to say this is on port 4, right? See, automatically it takes as port 4, and I will say okay. Now once this is done, I'll go back to dashboard and check on the network, and the route should be 4. Expand, and yeah, I have all these 4 routes showing in my routing table. Now if I go to the CLI and do the pings that I was doing earlier, this was already successful. Now we have to execute this one. Great, I am able to reach the public internet, as well as let's do execute ping to a URL, so that we will see the DNS is working fine, and the DNS is also working fine. That's a great news. And the last not but the least, I would see that the trace route is basically we want to confirm that the traffic is going through the R7 and not through the management port port 1. So I'll do a trace route to say 8.8.8.8, and if you see this, yeah, it is going to the 99 and then 192. So yeah, so that is confirmation that our lab is perfectly working fine. The routing is in place, the data plane is in place, and our both the firewalls are initialized, all the interfaces are configured, routing is in place, and default gateways are working fine. So natting is the pat is basically configured on R7, and yeah, so that's all for this video. In the next lecture we will see how to configure a basic security policy on DC1. So see you in the next lecture.